I worked at Six Flags last spring summer. Well, technically a freelance arts company leasing vending spots there. I was one of the oldest people hired. I was 18 at the time, attending college while most of my coworkers were in high school. I took photos in a sort of old-timey dress-up shop. It was honestly one of the most fun jobs I'd had. I was hired back in March 2018 and started work in April, when the park was open on weekends only before the official opening. I had been working for about a month, and the park was now open during the week for less than 10 hours per day. So I was able to work all day, but was unfortunately the only one in the shop as college was on summer break and high school was still in session until mid-June. You can see where this story is going. I was alone all day during the week and had some coworkers on the weekends. I was so terribly alone during the day that I'd walk across the path to go see my other coworker out of boredom. When I was outside of my shop during the day, I began to notice a man hanging around my area. I'd mainly see him walk by very, very slowly, staring at me, I presumed my shop, the whole time. I figured he was just shy, wanted a picture inside, and was too afraid or socially awkward to ask for pricing. Deep down, he gave me an uneasy feeling, but I decided to ignore it because he was a customer in the park and was probably just very antisocial. I kept a smile and tried pulling in customers all day, every day. One day I smiled and waved at him. That was probably my big mistake. He walked over briskly to stand in front of me and stare at me. I was creeped out. I was scared. He then asked about prices after days of walking by me and staring. I breathed a sigh of relief and started going through my memorized sales pitch. After I finished, he started to smile. Not a normal smile, one that made my skin crawl. He leaned in so close I could smell his breath. He asked how much it would be for him. I was confused as I'd just gone through my price list, so I stated that prices were set and non-negotiable unless you were an art company employee or a park employee. He shrugged and walked off. When I ran through my pitch, a family had grown interested and wanted some pictures, so I gladly took them into the shop and had a wonderful time photographing them. While I was checking the family out and collecting payment, I looked up and the man was back, leaning against the chain barrier in front of my shop. The family collected their things and walked to the chain. The man had to move to the side for me to open it for them. I immediately closed it behind them as he tried pushing his way in the shop. I told him I was sorry, but only paying customers could come in. He wasn't allowed in unless he was considering a purchase. He frowned and walked away. I waited a few minutes, tidied up the shop, and stepped back outside. It was almost closing time, so it was pointless, but I had to stand outside or else I'd get in trouble with my boss. I noticed him one last time that day. Across the way from me was a game, and I saw him hiding behind it, peeking his head out and looking at me. I can't tell you how scared I was. I wanted to cry. He continued to do this for the entire week, and I eventually began to ignore him, which he did not like. On that Friday, as soon as the park opened, he made a beeline towards me. I was out front organizing outdoor props, and I froze. I hastily dropped what I was doing and went inside, closing the chain behind me. He paced back in front of the chain, muttering to himself and looking at me. I was so terrified, I was going to run to the phone and call security if he didn't leave. He suddenly lurched forward, grabbing the chain in both of his hands. I will never forget this moment, because my heart stopped and my blood ran cold. His eyes were wild and that same menacing grin was back. He started whispering about things he wanted me to do to him. It was disgusting. He was talking about how he loved me and all of the sexual things he wanted to do to me. He wanted me to put him in a dress and said he wanted me to humiliate him in front of all the people in the park. I was slowly backing up to the wall in my shop as he started yelling and laughing. I told him to go away, that I would call security if he didn't leave right away. He got even more angry and said something that keeps me up at night, even a year later. I'll be waiting for you when you get out. Meet me by the employee exit on your way out or else. He gave me that disgusting smile and walked away. I went behind the counter and started sobbing. I never imagined I'd have something like this happen to me, and now that it had, all of my knowledge of what to do went out the window. I was crying like a little girl. I decided to tell my manager at the end of the day because I didn't want to be afraid of coming to work. When I told him, he was mortified that I hadn't told him sooner. He walked me to a secret exit to the employee parking lot so I wouldn't see the man. The next morning, we went to the security office and I gave a description to all of park security of what he looked like and what he normally would wear. I went back to my shop with two coworkers, and not even 5 minutes later, here he came, strolling over with an angry look on his face. I hadn't met him, and he was furious. My coworkers noticed my panic as I ran and hid in the back. I hadn't told them of my situation yet, and when I did, they told me they wouldn't leave me alone even after their shift was over, seeing as I was the closer and they didn't want me to be left alone. I called security and told them what he was wearing, so they updated information. They posted a security officer outside of my shop. He seemed to disappear because of that. When the officer left to take care of something, he came back. Security realized that every time a clothed officer was around, he would hide, so they posted a plainclothes officer across from my shop posing as a customer. I was being used as bait ultimately, but I felt it was important to get him out of the park. Security eventually apprehended him later that day as he was headed towards my shop. They asked me for identification on him, and I remember breaking down and sobbing. The officer comforted me. Finally, this nightmare was over. He never physically threatened me or wielded a weapon, but he was doing enough verbal threats to make me fear for my life. They banned him from all Six Flags parks around the country, that revoked his membership status and took him into custody. Unfortunately, as there was no violent act committed, they had to let him go. As I drove home that night, I saw him walking on the side of the road, and I immediately sped away in fear he would see me through the window and chase me. At least he couldn't get to me at work anymore. I found out a couple of weeks later from one of my security friends that he saw my stalker being arrested in a town over. I went and looked up arrest records for that town later in the day and saw he'd been arrested for indecent exposure, public endangerment, and public intoxication. I know what happened to me is not as severe as other stories, but it was one of the most terrifying weeks in my life. You really don't think something like this will happen to you until it does. Please, everyone, always notice who's around you at all times and be cautious of everybody. I live in the high desert mountains of Southern California, situated just below the Sierra Nevadas, about 30 minutes west of Mojave. My town is no booming metropolis. At the time, our largest market was a Kmart, one of the last still in business, I might add, and we only had 4 stoplights in town. This takes place in a subsection of the town about 13 miles from the shops, banks, and restaurants, in a small community largely inhabited by retirees. It's smack dab in the middle of summer and the temperatures were well in the high 90s to low 100s. My nightly routine would consist of walking my Australian Shepherd. However, I would wait until it was almost dark to avoid the heat. I grabbed my phone, a small pocket knife, some headphones, my pup, and set out for my nightly walk. My community is also home to a significant amount of equestrian riders as well as cattle ranchers. The trails I walked were designated horse riding trails set between pastures. That night, I had decided to take the horse trail that stretches for approximately 2 miles between back-to-back paddocks. It's basically a long, narrow trail that's between very large backyards. My ending destination was the Equestrian Center, a communal equestrian park where all types of horse riders could enjoy various activities on their horses. Making my way through the sandy terrain of the trail, it was nearly dark now. The sky was becoming a deeper shade of blue every time I looked up, and my dog was becoming harder to see. I estimated my arrival at the Equestrian Center to be around 15 minutes from my current position, so I sent a text to my mother. "I'll be at the Equestrian Center in about 15 minutes. Could you meet me there? I'm too tired to walk back." My mother had replied, "Sure, I'll leave in 10 minutes." Now, at this point, I was just outside the east entrance of the Equestrian Center, where the Enchanted Forest Trail connects to the straight trail I was on, sort of like a 3-way intersection. You can either go left into the Enchanted Forest Trail or go straight into the equestrian center. Before I reached the intersection of the trails, I noticed I shifted my dog's behavior as she becomes anxious and seemingly worried. She had her eyes fixated to the forest and stopped dead in her tracks. I played it off as another animal within the forest, like a bobcat or boar, as they weren't uncommon in my area. I gave her a slight tug on her collar, although she was still incessantly focused on the forest. With a little more convincing, I was able to get her moving forward, pushing on towards to Equestrian Center where my mother would be waiting for our arrival. Now, it was nearly pitch black, with only the moon guiding me with its low light. There was just the slightest of visibility, forcing me to turn on my cell phone's dim flashlight. Entering the Equestrian Center now, I noticed something that startled me immensely. A very tall person, a man, about 10 to 15 feet into the enchanted forest trail, with his back towards me standing completely still, his head facing the sky and his hands open, palms pointing in front of him while his arms are at his side. He was tall, approximately 6 feet, slim build, short dark hair, was wearing what looked to be light blue scrubs, or at least a very thin blue napkin-like material, and was barefoot. What startled me the most was his demeanor and what he was doing. His stance was enough to scare anyone in that setting, but as I approached him slowly, it appeared to me he was shaking, vibrating, or slightly convulsing, but doing so while standing up. It didn't seem like he had any control over it, although he remained his balance perfectly. Scared and not entirely sure what to do, I asked him, "Hello, excuse me?" I paused momentarily and raised my voice slightly with the next question. "Is everything all right?" When I said that, he stops shaking altogether, but still doesn't turn around or move another muscle. He just remains that same creepy position and doesn't even move. For a brief moment, I had thought I might have been imagining this. When I looked back up, he had moved closer to me, about 7 feet closer, now almost on my trail's path. I had only looked at my dog for a split second, and he did it without making a sound. He still wasn't facing me either, and his hands were still open, head still facing the sky. I wasn't about to wait and see what this guy was doing or what his intentions were, but I so slowly eased my way past him towards the Equestrian Center as quietly as I could before I felt that I was at a safe enough distance to start sprinting as fast I could away from this guy. When I reached the first arena of the Equestrian Center, I looked back into the direction of Forrest, completely out of breath. And there he was. The fucker was standing on the edge of trail outside of the forest, standing there, facing me. I was too far away to see his face, and frankly, I didn't want to. I couldn't make out features. All I could see was his silhouette illuminated by the moonlight peeking through the forest's trail. I continued to run with no intention of stopping until I found someone. I had never been so happy to see my nagging neighbor Penny and her moody mare Jolene riding in the Milano area. She noticed my distress, but due to her already harsh opinions of me, I had told her I had been on an endurance run and was just very out of breath and tired. I wanted to avoid any small town gossip as much as I could. My mother arrived with impeccable timing. During the ride home, I broke down in a state of paranoia, distress, and panic at what I had just witnessed. My mother didn't know exactly what to make of it, so she recommended I file a police report with local PD. About an hour after getting home, an officer shows up to take my statement. Following up the next day, the same officer claims to have went and checked out the area but didn't find anyone or anything out of the blue, apart from partials of bare footprints. But there's nothing incriminating. It's suspicious about someone going for a walk without shoes. He played it off as a joke and accused me of being under the influence, but I can assure you, I was completely sober. Nothing ever came out of this. I attended weekly therapy sessions for almost 2 years following this event and never went on walks by myself ever again. I had night terrors about the man and still do. I still don't know what to make of it. I don't know if I ever will. My husband and I had this habit of taking evening walks, usually just after the sun dipped below the horizon. It was our way of unwinding, getting some air, and walking off the heat of the day, and in our part of the country, even at dusk, it was still blazing. On this particular night, the temperature hadn't let up. It was hovering around 100 degrees Fahrenheit. I remember feeling sticky and irritable, so I picked up my pace, eager to get home and jump in the shower. We were on our usual route, quiet suburban streets, not a soul around, the kind of neighborhood that always feels safe. I'd gotten about half a block ahead of my husband, just far enough that I couldn't hear his footsteps anymore, when I rounded a corner near one of the main intersections. That's when I saw the car. It was a white sedan, maybe a little older model, with dull headlights and windows that were either tinted or just too dusty to see through clearly. It slowly drove toward me, not fast, not aggressive, just deliberate. I assumed it would pass and move on, so I kept walking, eyes forward, trying not to overthink it. But instead of continuing down the road, the car crept past me, then turned sharply and stopped directly to my right, completely blocking the crosswalk. At first I froze, confused more than scared. It wasn't until the rear passenger door popped open, the one closest to me, that everything suddenly made sense. I didn't hear any voices. I didn't see faces, just shadows, movement. There were at least 2 figures inside, maybe 3, and as the door opened, I noticed something else. A corner of a plastic sheet was hanging out of the trunk, flapping gently in the breeze. That was the moment I knew. My stomach didn't drop. My knees didn't buckle. I just reacted. I was about to run, already pivoting on my heel, when my husband came into view from around the corner. It all happened in seconds, but it felt like slow motion. The figures in the car saw him too, and in an instant, they yanked the door shut and tore off, tires squealing slightly as they disappeared into the night. I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there in shock, trying to register what had almost just happened. It hit me in waves, that sickening realization that I'd just been a few seconds away from being pulled into a car by complete strangers. We walked home fast, barely saying a word. Once I caught my breath, I called the police and reported everything. Unfortunately, I hadn't gotten a license plate number, and I couldn't describe the men. They were just dark shapes, shadows behind tinted glass. All I had was the strange detail about the plastic sheeting and that bone-deep feeling that I'd nearly been taken. The cops said they'd patrol the area more frequently, but that was it. No real lead to follow. It still feels surreal, like it was a scene out of someone else's life, not mine. But I know what I saw, and I also discovered something that night. When it really counts, I can move fast. To the creepy kidnapper guys in that white car, I'm grateful I never got to meet you, and I hope I never come that close again.